live, share the video out so we can get as many people on this discussion. It is going to be a good one. The Lord has really, really been just doing a whole lot in terms of understanding and enlightening us on so many different areas on Talk About It Tuesday. So this is just going to get even better, and I believe that. All right, anyone else? We have about 1 minute. We will be getting started. 1 minute. If you have any questions, tonight's topic is parents and healing for the whole month of April, but we are talking about specifically normalized dysfunction. Normalized dysfunction. So if you have any questions for our counselor, Mr. Taurus Sanders, please go ahead and have those questions. You can go ahead and drop them in there if you're thinking about it. If there's a question that just was on your mind that you want to ask, go ahead and put it in there. But as we are talking about situations, go ahead and put the questions in there as we are talking about it. All right. It is 7:05, and I know we have people joining us from, like I said, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Thank you so much. If you are joining us this evening, say hello. Let us know who you are. We want to welcome you to a very special Talk About It Tuesday because it is my birthday. So I am so excited to be here. And we have our guest, Mr. Taurus Sanders. We're going to let him introduce himself. I'm going to introduce him and then let him tell a little bit about himself. But first, I want to remind everyone of our mission. Every time we get on, I want to remind you that Light It Up TV's mission is to give children a voice, teach them how to use their voice in a positive way to impact their schools, their families, and their communities. So this is not just, and I say this all the time because I want you to share it out. It's not just for the parents that have children in that age group, but it is for any individual, mamas, daddies, aunties, uncles, Gigi's like myself, papas, anyone, godparents, anyone that has any involvement. Thank you, Sister Katrina, with children in that age group. This Talk About It Tuesday is for you. All right, so I've already done that. We have a special guest here, Mr. Taurus Sanders, and he is a licensed professional counselor, and he actually counsels children. He's going to let us know the age range of the children that he counsels. But as we are talking about parents and healing, I really felt led that we needed to bring someone on that is a Christian professional counselor that's able to give us some detailed insight in a different aspect of parents and healing. So, Mr. Taurus Sanders, thank you so much for joining us on Talk About It Tuesday.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. So I'm Taurus Sanders, and like you mentioned, I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm also a licensed professional counselor supervisor. I supervise newly licensed counselors and graduate students, and also a licensed addiction counselor. I've been counseling a little over 11 years now. And prior to that, I was a police officer here in the city of Columbia for 15 plus years.
Wow, so you've seen a whole lot.
So there's a transition from one, area of need to the other. I'm married to the lovely Tia Sanders, and I'm married for it'll be 17 years this August, and we have 4 children, 14 to 4.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Beautiful children as well. Beautiful children. T is my friend, y'all, my good friend. So Mr. Taurus, being in, wow, what a transition from law enforcement to now counseling is almost like 2 different sides of the spectrum, right? And so you've probably seen a little bit of everything in the police force with the children, and now you're actually helping them in a different aspect.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
And it's helping in a different way. As a police officer, you're kind of forced into someone's life. As a counselor, you're invited in. So it's just a different dynamic of how you're introduced or how you approach.
I love that. You're forced in them, yeah, because and then you're introduced. That's a good way. All right. So listen, thank you all for joining us. Before we get in, I want to let you all know, go ahead and share this out. I see that people say that they were this is Marilyn, invited by Michelle Grimes. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for joining us. And I see that Lachelle was invited by Katrina Demery. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you for all the birthday wishes. We are going to jump right in, okay? So our topic tonight is, for the whole month of April, we're talking about parents and healing. And how can parents heal while parenting? And this came from a discussion that from before when we were just talking about our children and being healed, Mr. Taurus, and the discussion came about saying, well, what about the parents that are actually parenting the children? And that's when we had a lot of feedback from parents saying, hey, let's do something about for the parents and being healed also. So the question we talked about, how can parents heal while parenting? And then now you brought up the issue, the topic, normalized dysfunction. I've heard this before, but I'm sure you're going to give me a little bit more insight. I can't really give you like a specific definition. So can you tell us what normalized dysfunction is and how does that play out in the lives of kindergarten through fifth grade children? And when you're talking about families and parents and parenting.
So, we get our foundation from our family of origin,
Mm-hmm.
and children aren't able to choose the family or the parents that they get.
Yeah.
And there is already a pattern or cycles that are already in existence before a child comes into the family or the relationship, if it's a marriage or if it's not a marriage. And sometimes we become conditioned to our way of functioning, and it isn't aware of it being problematic. So there's two things that I kind of look to gauge things, and that's functionality and healthiness. And if there's an issue with one of those areas, then I kind of like really address and explore it with people and families if I'm dealing with a family. And a lot of times we kind of like, okay, this is the way it's always been. This is how my mother did it. This is how my grandmother did it.
Yeah.
This is how my people did it. And we don't understand, okay, but what's the reason for doing that? And is that really helping? Is that really working?
Mm-hmm.
And some people will say, well, no, it's not, but I don't know another way. This is the way I do know.
Mm-hmm.
And it really hasn't been a problem, at least for me, but
Yeah.
it has been a problem for other people. And I think it is, also relevant to understand that, all behavior is learned. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily what we're taught. It's what
Mm-hmm.
we witness, it's what we experience, what we're exposed to, and what we're conditioned to, throughout our environment, through our relationships. And there's
Mm-hmm.
things that we just pick up through those observations, through those experiences that we end up repeating, imitating, and normalizing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it is also fair to say that normality is not an indication of good or bad. It's just
Okay.
a relative description of the situation.
So, okay. So, can you explain that for me? When you say normality, because I might look at something and say that's not, healthy. But when you say it's not good or bad, it's a difference between healthy and unhealthy versus good or bad. Is that what you're? Okay.
Well, we'll see. When we talk about normal, we usually assign it to something that's good.
Mm,
But normal could be also a consistency of something bad or unhealthy as well.
it's true.
So it's really a pattern.
A pattern.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. It's just whatever the situation, relative to the situation, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why dysfunction can be normalized, like functionality can be normalized.
Mm,
And so, when we kind of look at it, okay, this is normal because this is what I'm used to. This is what
right.
familiar to me. And therefore that's why it doesn't kind of light up as a problem.
And would you say that Because as you're talking about like patterns and something that we're used to, whenever you're counseling, now do you counsel, let me ask this, do you counsel parents and the children or
So
just the children, or how do you do that?
so it's a combination of both, and
Mhm.
it just depends on the dynamics.
Okay.
It just depends on the parent if they're receptive, or if I've had parents like, "Hey, just fix my child,"
Wow.
and really don't want to be involved, and so I work with that too. But I try to incorporate
How would
parents.
you do that? Like if there is, and I think that was the question when we were talking about how initially when we were talking about giving children a voice, and which we were talking about them being heard and understood, right?
Sure.
And one of the things that um was discussed, especially in the schools, is that you see a child who's acting out or being mean, and that child, even though it's unfortunate that they're doing that to another child, but because they don't have a voice. No one is giving them a voice to be heard or understood at home. And the guidance counselor was saying that, but when they see the parent and the parent has to come up, then they say, oh, but this is where the child has learned this behavior. As you stated, right? The behaviors are learned from different environments, from what they've seen and heard. So is it possible to help the child without helping the parents?
Oh,
Like if a
absolutely.
parent comes and they say, because the child has to still go back in that environment, right?
But they don't have to go back with the same mindset.
Mm, okay.
And so
Okay.
there is a power of, exposure. And when you've only been exposed to one alternative, that's all you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
But then when you have an experience of another alternative or other alternatives,
Mhm.
you then have choice.
Wow.
And so that is one of the things that, I help with all clients, not just children.
Mhm.
But with the child, they don't know that they have choice or options as alternatives, because they're used to like, okay, this is it, this is how it is, or this is how
Mhm.
I have to be, or how I have to show up.
Right.
And some of that is, you know necessary in moments where they need to survive or they need to cope in certain situations.
Mhm.
But when you're not in those environments where you need to survive or you need to cope, you just need to be. But you don't have that as an option. You don't have that. You don't think of that as an opportunity or have a permission to do that.
Right. So because this is all you've seen and you've doing it this way. All right, you all have heard this. This is the question that we've been asking. So we talked about, and heard Mr. Taurus just said that it is possible. Hi, Henrietta Sims. Thank you so much for watching. If you are just joining us, our topic is normalized dysfunction. Is it possible? How can parents heal while parenting? And we were just talking about how is it possible for him to counsel and help the children without helping the parents? If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the comment section. Any comments, any question for our host, for Mr. Taurus, for our counselor, drop them in there. So I see that Katrina Demery says, and I have something that I want to ask. I've experienced parents degrading children, and although it's shocking to me, it appears to be normal to the parent as well as the child. How do you approach the situation to break that behavior?
Oh wow, and that's a very difficult one because that's probably the more common one
Mm,
is a child's perception of themselves that's offered by other people, and that's the argument. So that's the argument that hasn't been argued against. And
mm,
so we have to argue against that argument. We have to present a truth and find the facts and find you know the evidence to support, like, no, you're not that, or no,
mhm,
you don't have to be like that, or you're not like your mother, you're not like your father. And it's those things that you really have to argue against. Like in scripture says, casting down every arguments, right? So
mhm,
it's the same
mhm.
thing. Like,
Right.
a lot of times there's arguments that don't go challenged.
And so when you said we have to, and I love that, we have to get evidence to support, to let the child know that is not, even though they've been told this, even though they've heard this, that is not who God says that they are, right? That is
Right.
not who they actually are. Where are we getting the evidence from? Where does that
From them.
from them?
And that's where, you know, there is the creating the safety and the space for a child to show up and be okay being there as themselves. And once they do that, you begin to see things, and then you begin to call it out. You begin to acknowledge and confirm, you know, what you see at the counselor I'm speaking as,
Mm-hmm.
and say, well, I see this about you, or like, hey, you know, what do you think about that? Do you like that? You know, or I see
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, when you talk about that, you're, you know, you spark up, or you smile, or something positive
Mm-hmm.
happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all you're doing is really um, getting the truth out of them, but you're
Wow.
confirming it, and that creates an argument,
Mm-hmm.
and which is the real argument anyway, but
Right.
it's not the one that's really being echoed or being,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, broadcasted.
That's good. So it's almost like a reprogramming.
Well, of course,
Right?
of course,
That's what it's, yeah, like reprogramming them. And I'm sure it's easy for them to gravitate back, as we said, to what's normal, what has been their normal. But the goal is to continue to speak life,
sure,
to
sure,
continue to speak what the so that they can develop a positive image instead of what Katrina was saying, a degrading image of themselves. That the picture begins to change. Is that what happens? Is what I'm thinking, that the picture begins positive reinforcement. That's right, Katrina. The picture begins to change how it looks to them. Is that right?
that too. But it also creates one of the life, um, one of the things that happens in life,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing about relationships, and I think this is one of the most beautiful thing that God created about relationships, is that relationships are mirrors. And a
Mm.
child is learning mirroring before they even know what it really means.
Wow.
And so we have to be careful, you know, as parents, how they see themselves through relationships,
Mm.
because what will happen, and what usually happens, is they will, you know, if, for example, if they have a negative, you know, perspective of themselves, or something negative has been kind of like repeated and rehearsed.
Mhm.
And so when they get into another, you know, a non-family like relationship, they project that degraded image as a mirror. And then
Mhm.
that person that doesn't really know them, they interact with that part of themselves.
Wow.
And so then it gets reinforced. And then, you
Mm.
know, they have other relationships, and that gets reinforced. It's like, but that's not really the true core person.
Right,
That's just
right.
the mirroring that they've learned how to show up.
Mm. Wow. This is how they have learned how to show up. Someone has a question. It says, "Can a parent break," and make sure, Lachelle, if I'm reading this correctly, uh, can can yes, Christina, reinforcement of what their normal is, reinforce what is their normal. Lachelle said, "But can a parent break the child even after the child has been given a choice?" Lachelle, I want to make sure I'm understanding that. So you're saying that once counseling has begun and we are talking and giving the child the positive reinforcement to help them see themselves the way that they're supposed to see themselves instead of that negative aspect, you're saying, can the parent come back and break the child after they've been given that choice? Is that your question, Lachelle? I want to make sure. Correction. Okay. Put, if you can type it again so I can make sure. But when you talked about the mirroring, uh, Mr. Sanders, that goes back to one of the things that I was sharing with how and this is like not in the terms of normalized dysfunction, but in the terms of mirroring how children, they develop that before they even know. Oh, she said that's what she's saying. Okay, we'll go back and answer that question before they even know that that's what mirroring is. But can children actually pick up like your own emotions and feelings and mannerisms? Can they pick up on those things? And actually take on those things like from the parent, even if the parent is not saying that, but the way the parent actually behaves or treats them, they may not actually say it, but can the child pick up on the emotion of it, or the facial expression, or what's behind the way they're treated? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. All of that is true. And I'll even go a little further. It even happens before birth. And what we unfortunately realize is that a lot of experience start in the womb. And, for example, a female that's pregnant, that's in a abusive, physically or psychologically relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and her body is highly stressed.
Mm-hmm.
The fetus, the baby is experiencing that tension and physical distress. And so you think like, obviously I have 4 kids, so watching my children in my wife's belly, seeing them
Mm-hmm.
move, and then when you touch the belly, the child,
Mm-hmm.
kind of responds, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the child calms down. So when you think about when there isn't that bonding
Mm-hmm.
or child, that even in the fetus, and
Right.
what they're experiencing is all this tension, this high stress. And so
Mm-hmm.
they come out in the world and experience it in a different way, because
Oh.
the mom is probably, traumatized, or, emotionally and mentally
Mhm, mhm,
abused by all of that. And
mhm.
so it's hard for her to even being a healthy parent,
Mm,
because she's got her own stuff she has to deal with. And so we find a lot of children um, having emotional issues, and we say, it's after birth, but usually it starts before that. We have evidence it starts before that.
wow. In the womb. And is I've heard this before, but the way that you're giving the scientific background, like this is actually what happened in studies, like wow, like it's not just whenever they get out. So it actually even begins beforehand. The child can feel what is going on, the disconnect,
Right.
even while they're even in the womb. We're talking about, I know, Gloria, we're talking about normalized dysfunction. So give us an example, Mr. Sanders. What would that look like in real life? If you all have any questions, we're talking about normalized dysfunction, and then we're going to ask him the question, how can parents heal while parenting? So yes, I know everyone is on there. They're like surprised. I know the fact that you're saying that it starts in the womb, and how that is an important factor whenever from the beginning, like even before that child even his birth into this world. Is like they may, if that disconnect is there, then
Well, you have to also think
that leads
about,
me to another that leads to another question, like how do we if it was there doing their, how do you repair it afterwards? So many questions. Go ahead.
but when you think about, like, I have 4 kids and all of them have a different temperament. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, like, okay, what was my wife going through with this child? Or, what was
Mm,
going on in our life with this child? Because,
yeah.
like, they're completely different.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And
Wow.
sometimes it can be explained in that way, like, what was the state of emotions and what was the state of your mind while
Wow.
you're pregnant? Because that does, kind of create that foundation of temperament. And sometimes our kids are just kind of reacting out of that environment.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Environment in the womb and outside of the womb.
Right.
Man. Okay. So I want you to tell us, if you all have any questions, drop them in there. We have the counselor here. Drop them in there, because as he's talking, I'm getting more questions, but I'm going to stay on track. If we have time, Mr. Doris, I want you to answer like if they are born with the disconnect, like how do we get back on track? But let's stay. The question I want to what does normalized dysfunction look like? And like, give us a scenario. Can you give us a scenario of what that may look like? Of maybe a situation that you may have dealt with?
So, oh goodness, I have so many different examples. I would say because I deal with a lot of boys,
Mm-hmm.
of single mothers or divorced mothers, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think one of the things is, and I was my mother was single growing up, so I can kind of relate to this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when children of a single parent, and it's different for genders, I will say too.
Mm.
Um, they become parentified in some shape or form. So for the boy, especially if he's the oldest, he will become what we call the man of the house. And if it's the oldest daughter, she will become, like the second mother or the second, you
Mhm,
know.
mhm.
And sometimes that is taking on responsibilities and roles that is not appropriate for the age.
Mm.
And so what that ends up doing is it causes a level of anxiety or worrying about things that really aren't their
Mhm.
responsibility. And,
Wow.
and so what they tend to do is they become caretakers, they become enablers, they become rescuers,
Mm.
um, and they don't really take very good care of themselves.
Mm.
And
Wow.
and it's almost like they're sacrificing their life, they're sacrificing themselves for somebody else's.
Because that's what they
That's
were
what they've
taught, and
yeah,
that's what they've had to do
right.
in the family. So that answers the question. That answers 2 questions because the question is, what are the effects on the children whenever I know Gloria, and Lachelle, like, what is the effects on the children? So when there is one of the examples, normalized dysfunction, and I've seen the child in my classroom that's always that I have to say, no, you do your work, and they're always trying to, in my first grade class, I've
Mhm.
seen it. When you said that, oh, Katrina, that's good. She said they miss the innocence of childhood. I've seen the child in my class. And how many of you all have seen a child like that, or know of um, a child like that, where I've seen where I give the assignment out to the class, but she's going around making sure everybody else is,
Right.
taking care of all of the other children, and her work goes lacking. And then when it's time to turn an assignment, her work is not done because of the fact that she's been so concerned. And I said, "What have you been doing?" "I've been making sure this person has that." "Well, no, I need you to." But and that's where so it not only plays out in the home, it plays out with them at school as well. Well,
And then the other, social, relationships as well. It's
mhm.
not just confined to one area.
Right, it's not confined to one area, so this carries over into a lot of their, if not all, the majority of their relationships and that they have. Um, so wow, that is so true. I want to go back to Lachelle's question, but can you put Gloria's up there? Her comment, that has been our culture to make the oldest child responsible for everyone else when mom or dad is away. Wow.
I want to address the question that was asked earlier about
Yes.
can a parent break the child even after
Mhm.
they have been given a
Yes.
choice? And I would say that does happen, um, and it's kind of hard to explain it uh, because I think of people kind of with this analogy. If we're all like a glass jar, we all have different thickness of the glass, and some
Mhm.
of us have a thicker, glass, and some people have a
Mhm.
thinner glass.
Mhm.
And we don't quite know why a person has a thicker or thinner glass. We just
Yeah.
know that that's just how uniquely different we are.
Right.
And some kids are, most kids are resilient, and we hear that a
Mhm.
lot. Um, but unfortunately, there are some kids that, and some people that just don't recover, even when there is an alternative and there's been, a choice that has been presented. And a lot of that is because of, how they identify themselves, the
Mhm.
mindset that either reinforces that or
Mhm.
struggles with that. Um, so unfortunately, that is a possibility, and we see it in society, obviously.
Yeah. So, when you said that, it reminded me, I used to work with at-risk behaviorally challenged youth in a group home setting for 18 years. And these were children that were removed from their home because of some type of physical abuse, some type of abuse, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's neglect, for some time. And they were placed with us inside of the home. And we were to provide what we call behavior modification.
Right,
And sometimes we would get siblings. And that's what reminded me of when you said that. I'm thinking of two siblings now that was from Charleston. And when you talk about some of them, you're welcome, Lachelle. She said, thank you for answering that. Where
absolutely.
you're talking about some of them having that thicker, glass and the thinner glass, you just never know how it's going to affect a child. Am I right? Like you never know. And we would provide the behavior modification, and then they would go on visits with the mother
Right,
on weekends. And sometimes when they would come back to our facility, you see the child begin to act out,
right,
right? You see the same behaviors that we were helping them to deal with and try to modify and try to change because they went back in that environment for a weekend and then they came back. We see the same pattern. And so now it's like almost like we're having to start over again until sometimes the social worker would say, this isn't healthy. Like
right,
we have to stop them. And so, Lachelle, this is what it's reminding me of. We have to stop them to prevent the normalized dysfunction mindset, right? Of this child thinking this is normal and this is okay. Sometimes we had to break and cut that tie
right,
from the parent because it was not benefiting the child. We had two siblings. One of them ended up graduating with their diploma, and the other one ended up in prison.
right, right,
One, one of them was able to deal with what was with being able with that whole situation, and one of them wasn't. And so, yeah, so that's what that reminded me of. With the normalized dysfunction. You all, we are talking, so the question is, Mr. Taurus, is it possible for parents to heal and for them to do something different? Um, and as we are closing, for them, is it possible for them to do something to change? And how do they go about doing that? Because as Gloria said, a lot of it is our culture,
absolutely.
right? Our own culture where we know firsthand. How many of you know firsthand of the older sibling put in charge while the mom had to go out to work? Sometimes there was an effect. I think Katrina said sometimes it produces animosity even between the siblings when that happens.
Oh, absolutely.
Uh,
Because especially when there's like 5 or 6 plus kids, each kid has a role that they play in the family. Like
Mhm.
there's someone that's like the hero, the high achiever. There's the one that's the problem. There's the one
Mhm.
that's kind of overlooked and kind of
Yeah.
invisible. So,
Mhm.
it's like almost a character in somewhat of a reality show. And, each child knows how they kind of fit or don't fit in the family dynamic.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so that animosity or that jealousness or that bitterness, and it's not the kid's fault. They're just kind of playing the role to survive in this
Right.
family unit, right?
Right.
But
Right.
because they can't do anything about the parents, they just take it out amongst each other, especially when a parent dies or both die.
Mm.
And then
Mhm.
now they're really fighting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because now they're trying to find space and place where they never really felt they had it before.
Mm. So, whose responsibility is it?
So both. Um,
Because and can you share, is it just, and that's why I say, someone said the black sheep. Someone said sometimes it's the middle child. As we're closing, I'm thinking about like whose responsibility is it? That's why I often say sometimes, if the parent is there, it takes a village. If the parent has
sure.
some things going on, there's should there be a village? Like when we see it, do we overlook it, or how do we go about without that parent? Because sometimes if we see things and we try to intervene, that parent's going to get defensive. Like, who do you think you are coming in, uh,
Right.
trying to change things in my household? Because to me, it looks right.
Right. Oh,
Okay,
absolutely. Absolutely.
so what do we do? Thank God for my village. Yes, yes. What do we do?
So
Or whose responsibility is it, should I say?
so I say both because for young children, they don't necessarily have the means to seek out, the therapy or the healing.
Mhm.
So it's definitely up to the parents at that point. But unfortunately, we know, well, from my experience, a lot of people don't get healing and counseling until their adulthood from their childhood issues.
Oh.
Like 99.9% of the time, I have to go back to people's childhood to really root out where the origin of things started. And, you know, a lot of people are like, wow, I didn't realize like that still followed me or that still really was impacting my life.
So even when they come to counseling as a child, you're saying that sometimes that
No, as an adult, when they
as
come
an
as an
adult,
adult,
okay,
it's their childhood stuff that they really haven't, they like, it's been
come to grips.
years, so they've kind of
Mhm.
forgot, or that's not, a
Mhm.
problem. Like,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's a pattern, really, it's a pattern.
Yeah.
Um, and so for parents, identifying, and this is hard, I shared with you the title of the book, Hurt People. And the first chapter in the book is Unseen Wounds. And what it talks about in that chapter is a lot of times we are so wounded and we've been so wounded for so long, we don't
Mm.
even realize we're still bleeding. And then we're bleeding on to other people.
Mm.
And so when you live a life bleeding in relationships that you've normalized,
Mhm.
you don't really think you need to seek healing. You don't really need to seek support. You don't really need to seek some sort of like
Mm.
forgiveness or whatever the case may be. So that's hard when a person don't even know that they're wounded living in relationships. But when a person finds out, like, hey, this is a problem or this continues to be a problem in my life, when that person
Mhm.
kind of gets that awareness and that acknowledgement, then what they
Wow.
have to do, that's where the responsibility comes in
Mhm.
to say, okay, healing is available.
Yeah. Yeah. So
You
healing is available. That answers the
absolutely,
so healing is available.
absolutely. But it's
Wow.
such, but you have to give yourself permission to do it.
And it's almost like, so to get someone to realize that they're still bleeding, that they're still wounded, like you said, the unseen wound, like that they're still wounded. Like James said just now, they have to be brave enough to revisit those wounds. Because as we said last week, healing is ugly.
And healing is painful.
It's painful.
It's not as much ugly as it is painful.
Mm-hmm.
And we think of pain as something for us to run away from. But pain is really a motivator for us to really do something about the source of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so we look at pain as a negative thing, but pain can be a very necessary thing for us to not ignore the obvious.
Wow. To not ignore the obvious. That is good.
But culturally, in our society, and I mean
You
the
want to run
American
away.
society,
Uh-huh.
is I want to numb it, I want to
Yeah.
escape, I want to distract
Yeah.
myself, I want
Mm-hmm.
to over-engage in something else other than
Mm-hmm.
what really is trying to call my attention.
Oh, you just when you said that. Yeah. When you said trying to overindulge in something else, that was me.
Mm.
That was me. As a child, I made straight A's. Yes, he is definitely unpacking. I made straight A's in school. I buried myself into my schoolwork because I knew when I went home, there was a verbal abuse.
Mm.
So I did everything to try to avoid that, to keep anyone from knowing that that was going on. And I ran track, I played softball, I played basketball, I was in the math club, the student government, cheerleading, like everything to try to mask what I really was feeling inside.
Right.
Well, I see we got some comments on here that says healing is painful but very necessary, to not ignore the obvious. That's right. That's what he said. Pain is the motivator to heal. These are some good nuggets, you all. Yes, Gloria. And the numbness wears. What do you do when the numbness wears off?
Well,
Feel it.
a lot of people they say, "Oh, I feel numb." Well, numb is a feeling.
That's true.
It is a feeling. It just
Uh-huh.
feels differently
Mhm.
from the typical pain, right?
Mhm.
And so numbness is still an indication that there's some feeling, some sensitivity there.
Wow.
But
Wow.
when you're calloused and when you're hardened and you don't
Mhm.
feel anything, or what we call apathy, that's the worst place. When you feel
Mhm.
nothing on one side or the other.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Wow. Whew. Mr. Taurus, this is good that you just said that. You answered the question. I know, Gloria, I'm crying with you, girl. Numbness is a feeling. You all, Mr. Taurus, thank you for sharing with us what normalized dysfunction is. And I think if this gave you all a good example of why our children and the effects of normalized dysfunction, how it plays out on our children, just say like, yes, I get it. Like, I get it. If you get it, just drop in the comments, I get it. I get it. Yes, this is powerful. Please share this discussion with other people, because the ones of us that are on here, this is good, but we want it to reach. There are other people, there are kids all over, and their parents. I get it. Thank you. Drop the I get it. Yes. People still saying my, like, they're the crying emojis and stuff. Yes, drop I get it. I get it. Yes, thank you. Just drop the I get it in there. Comment I get it. Yes, I get it. This is powerful. Yes. Whoo, yes, and you all every week, and I don't plan this every week. Mr. Taurus and I did not talk about this.
Right.
Man, do I get it. But whenever he said that, I just saw myself. And every week, the Holy Spirit has been allowing me to be vulnerable and has been showing bits and pieces of my childhood to me and just giving me enlightenment about, wow, like, this is what was going on back then. Right. Thank you. Thank you. All the I get is yes, yes. If you all have any questions for Mr. Taurus, you all drop them in, continue to drop them. You can drop them in the comments even after we get off. This is just the beginning. So if it was like this, can you all imagine what the next couple of sessions is going to be like? Remember, thank you for joining us in our comments section. Our Light It Up TV fam, thank you so much. You can catch this full discussion playback. So if somebody wants to, you know what, I need to share this with nieces or nephews that that have experienced some type of normalized dysfunction, and this can begin to just help them to realize something different, right? To do something different and to realize that I have been functioning, or allowing them to see. Yes, I think we're all seeing ourselves. Thank you, Katrina. We are all seeing ourselves, and yeah. I'll be trying to hold together, y'all. I'll be trying to hold together. And so just share the video out at 9 p.m. We'll if you want to catch the replay again. I always catch the replay again because when I go back, I'm like, oh man, and I try to take notes while he's talking. But yes, oh wow, next session, yes. He will be on for the next couple of sessions, you all, and we're just, and what I remember when I spoke with you, Taurus, you said is digging deep, and now I see why you said that, because when you're talking about that hurt people, I've heard of that before, but never in the aspect of parent to child, right? We always talk about just other linear relationships, but not that vertical relationship between the parent and the child. When you talk about hurt people. So thank you all so much for joining us. Remember, it is my birthday. And so for my birthday, I'm doing a giveaway, and all you have to do is share the YouTube channel, tag 2 people to subscribe, and tag Light It Up TV as well, so that we can get as many people to get in on these discussions, you all. Thank you so much. Until next time, Mr. Taurus, thank you. We look forward to it. Thank you all. Absolutely. We look forward to next week. Until next time, everyone, light it up. Mr. Taurus, hold tight. Everyone else, light it up. We'll see you next week. If you have any questions for Mr. Taurus, just inbox us.